Kia ora students, if you're watching this video then you want to learn how to choose an essay question when you're working with the giver. If you're using this particular video, that should mean that you're not so confident with your essay writing. Sometimes you get achieved, maybe sometimes you get a not achieved when you write practice essays or when you write in an exam. So if you're here, that's good. If, however, you're a student who always gets merit or excellence, then you should probably be looking over at the advanced video series. Here are the 11 steps that I think you need to undertake in order to answer an essay question. You'll see that step number 4 is called opening quote. In this series I won't be covering that because I think that's something for advanced students to be working on. But if you get to the end of step 3 and you feel really confident and you want to attempt that, then head on over to the other series of videos about the giver which are labelled advanced, and you can still do that. It's entirely up to you, your choice. Here are what your questions are going to look like when you do NCEA English at level 1. In the actual exam there'll probably be around 7, maybe 8 questions to choose from. First thing that you always have to remember, you only have to do one question. Don't do all 7 or all 8 because you won't achieve the standard. You need to choose one. So that's our first step in this whole process, is choosing a question. The way I like to do it is by really quickly eliminating the questions you don't like the look of. Don't put too much thought into it. The longer you take in this part of the process, the less time you'll have to actually write your answer. So when I first looked at these, I just went like this. No, 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 maybe, no, no. Okay, that's the one I'm doing. It's as simple as that. The only reason you would second guess it, of course, is if you get to the very end and you've crossed out every single question. But hopefully many of you will be left with 2 or 3 different options and you'll be able to decide, well, this one makes the most sense to me and there doesn't look to be any hidden traps in it, so that's the question I'm going to choose. I'm just going to go into a little more detail about why I chose this question. Feel free to skip ahead if you want to. So this question, number 5, is describe at least one event that was a turning point in the written text. Explain why the turning point was important in the text as a whole. So I like the sound of that question. I understand what it's saying really, really quickly, and it doesn't have any added elements. It's just about an event, turning point, and why it's important. If you take a look at question number 6, describe at least one technique in the written text that helped show the writer's ideas. Explain how the technique showed the writer's ideas. Now, to me, that's a really complicated question that is more suitable for poetry. So the first part there, it's complicated. You have to talk about at least one technique and you have to talk about writer's ideas. And then the other part there about it being better for poetry, when you look at poetry, you often look at things like vocabulary, imagery, style, symbolism, structure, narrative point of view. And so this question lends itself to poetry. It doesn't really lend itself to a novel like The Giver. Compare that to question 5, which is very simply written and just focuses on the event that is a turning point and how it is important. So that's why I have chosen question number 5 to work with. But you might choose a different question, and that's absolutely your choice. So the second step is working out what that question is actually asking of you. If you don't understand what the question is asking, then you can't answer the question accurately and in any detail. The first word in the question is something that a lot of students don't even think about. It often begins your essay questions, but you don't connect. What does describe actually mean? Well, it's really, really simple. Describe just means the examples that you put in. When you put a quote into your essay, you are describing the event that was a turning point. So don't stress about that too much as long as you know that you are including examples in your essay. The next important word here is the word event. It needs to be an important event in the novel. You can't just choose a moment that doesn't really have any significance. But you also have to remember that it needs to be something contained in a series of moments. So when you're writing about The Giver, you can't just decide that your event is going to be the entirety of the novel. You have to choose a moment, one event, something that happens that you're going to talk about. This is the most potentially confusing part of the whole question, turning point. It's just, as I have said here, a fancy way of saying a time when something major changes. Another phrase to use would be important event. So a turning point when something major shifts in the story. The next keyword is important, the word important itself. Hopefully that's self-explanatory for you guys, but a lot of students tend to forget this whole aspect of explaining why the turning point was important. It would be a very different essay question if the sentence said, explain why the turning point was surprising or challenging. But this question is very simple and it's gone for that word important, so you need to make sure that you address that in your plan. And finally, here's the one little tricky bit that you might see here, as a whole. This question doesn't want you to talk about one moment. It doesn't want you to only focus on the turning point. It does want you to talk about how the turning point connects to the whole story. Explain why the turning point was important in the text as a whole. So here's your turning point, something happened, now how did that connect to the rest of the story? Once you go through that process with your own question, you should have a really strong understanding of what the question is actually asking you to talk about. If you make a mistake, it can be something that stops you from getting achieved. I'm sure if you looked back at your essays from last year, if you didn't get achieved, chances are you forgot an important element of the question. So you need to make sure that you engage with the question closely. Look at every single word and work out what the examiner or the marker wants you to say in this essay. What do they want you to discuss? Have they put any little things in there to trip you up? For example, that phrase, as a whole. I strongly recommend that you go through this process of labelling your essay question, not only when you do your practice writing, but in the exam itself. If you annotate, this is called annotating, if you annotate your question, you're much more likely to notice a little tricky part to it, or have a realization about a moment or a turning point that you can actually discuss that will be really useful. So please take the time to do this. This has taken me a few minutes, but if you practice, doing this should only take you 1 or 2 minutes.